All right, so now we're in the kitchen and we've got to move on to the next step. We've taken our 5/8 inch wood dowels. We've inserted our weed whacker line into the 550 cord. We've wrapped it onto the dowel using the drill. So I've got 3 of these that are made up. So now we've got the boiling water. Remember I mentioned earlier that when you cut your wood dowel, make sure that it's going to fit into whatever pan that you're going to use. So now we just simply pop these in. Maybe use a set of tongs. Make sure they're in there. It's okay that they're floating. I've done a lot of these before. You don't have to worry about keeping them submerged. No worries there. So essentially you're going to leave these in the boiling water for 10 minutes. When the 10 minutes is up, we'll take them out and we'll move on to the next step. Okay, it's been about 10 minutes. You can see the water's still got a nice boil going on. These have just been sitting in here. So we simply just we'll turn off our heat. And just one at a time, we'll pick them up. Make sure you use some type of some tongs or something. And then you see here, we're going to put them in a bowl of ice water. So the heat from the boiling process makes the weed whacker line very malleable, and it conforms it to the shape around the wood dowel. And then putting it into the ice water locks the memory of that weed whacker line, so when we take it off of the wood dowel, it keeps its shape. So those we'll just put into the ice water. We'll leave those in also for about 10 minutes, and then we'll move on to the next step. See you then. Okay, it's been about 10 minutes. So now we're ready to take these out of the ice water. I like to let them dry for a few hours, depending on what time of day it is, overnight, 3 or 4 hours, just so they're not just completely soaked. I'll show you how I set these up to dry. See you in a minute. All right, so back out in the garage. Easiest way that I do to dry the coils while they're still on the wood dowels is I just set them in my vise, close it up, not too tight because I don't want to squish and damage the wood dowels. So I just set them up, kind of hold them all in my hand, get a little tight, and then spread them out, let some air get around it. You can put a fan on it or whatever you want, but we'll come back in a couple of hours when they're a little bit drier, and we'll move on to the next step of taking them off of the wood dowels and forming that loop and dubbing knot. See you then. All right, so we're picking back up on the video to finish these coiled lanyards out. I've left one in the wood dowel where we left off. We had 3 of them in the vise to dry. They have completely dried, and as a matter of fact, I've got 2 of them that I already have taken off of the wood dowels, and I finished them out. So I'm going to go through that right now. Okay. So once you take it out of the wood dowel, you have to get the weed whacker line out of the wood. So usually I'll take a pair of needle nose and I'll just grab the end, and you can pull it out. When it sits in there for a long time drying out, it can be a little difficult. Let's get you a good bite. There you go. Just inch them out. All right, that's one side. This side should be easier. There we go. Okay, so once out, these have been on here drying for so long, they're really tight, so you can't just pull it off. So I just unwind it. Get it all the way off. And once we get it off, I will show you the way that I like to make the loop. There are lots of different ways. I've seen people use ferrule crimps for like wire. I've seen people use little like posts, electrical posts that they crimp onto the ends. I myself like to do what's called a whipping knot, and I'm going to show you how I do that. And I use some shrink tubing and I reuse some of the inner core twine that comes out of the 550 cord when we first started. So I use a piece of that, however long, probably at least 12 to 14 inches. I like to use a nice long piece, and you'll see why towards the end. Of course, we have our heat shrink wrap. Let's see, that's a little too small. So we use this piece. I cut myself off, about an inch. Not much more than that. Just want to have enough to cover that whipping knot when you're done. So you'll see that we have a lot of weed whacker line sticking out. And on the finished coil, I like to have just the 550 cord. None of the weed trimmer line in the loop itself, because I like that to be nice and flexible. So what I'll do is I kind of pull it, stretch it out, and I measure, about 3 coils, and I'll pull that 550 cord down. So about 3 coils are showing. I'll hold that still, take my snips, snip it off. And then I'll take my 550 cord and pull that back out. And you'll see there, now I've got about 2.5 inches of 550 cord that I can easily lay over to do my whipping knot. Now to do that, there's lots of videos on YouTube on how to do a whipping knot. Probably do a better job than I'm going to do right now. But essentially what I do is I take my inner core, my twine, and I just fold it in half, especially if it's a nice long piece like this. First things first, because I usually always forget, I slide my shrink tube over the 550 cord and I push it down a bit. Because I want to push it down past where the weed trimmer line is inside the 550 cord. So once that's on there, I just fold my 550 cord over. It's nice and flat. I just pinch that. I take my twine that I folded a loop into, and I pinch that on top of the 550 cord loop. Just like that. So I've got my 2 tag ends going out away from the loop, and then I've got my looped end going back towards the coils. So I just hold that with my thumb and index finger towards the back of the loop, and I take, you see, this is the tag end going out to the left, this one's going out to the right. I take the one going out to the right in my hand, and I just start doing touching wraps going back towards the coils. So I need to start my thumb a little further up there. Get this situated. Alright, so you see here, I've got touching wraps going back towards the coils, and I'm not pulling that super tight. I'm pulling it just tight enough to keep it nice and neat, but I'm not bearing down on that because you're going to want that loop to slide up underneath all these coils. And you'll see what that looks like in just a minute. So, I've probably done 8 or 9. My last loop, my last touching wrap, then I come back up, and I want to go through the loop. Now I always go from top to bottom through the loop, and I hold on to that tag end. And while I hold on to that tag end, I start with my right hand, that other tag end that we started out with, and I start to pull it tight. And you'll see what that does is it starts to pull that loop underneath. Tighten that up a little bit. Now I'm just going to hold on to the 550 cord, and I'm going to pull that loop up underneath those wraps till about the halfway point. Halfway in between the top and the bottom of the wraps. Once I get that where I want it, I take both tag ends and you see where it's nice to have a nice long piece, and I just start to pull that tight. And then I pull it tighter. Sometimes I'll even take, on the small end, I'll take a pair of pliers, needle nose or whatever, and then I'll wrap this around my other hand and I'll really bear down. Oh, that's okay. We'll clean that up in a second. So that really makes a nice, neat, uniform whipping knot. So now all you have to do is take your scissors and just clean up these ends. My scissors are a little dull. Burn that extra off. I'll cut this side. I tell you what I'm going to do also. You see this extra bit of 550 cord? I'm going to trim that off as well. And take your lighter and clean everything up. There you go. I even heat the wraps a little bit too. I found that the heating of the wraps kind of hardens them. You don't want to heat it for too long because you don't want to burn through. This little tuft right here, you see that? I'll burn that all the way back. Smash that down. Now, I wouldn't hang by this loop. You know, I'm not sure what the pound test is to be able to support, but for making things like rod leashes and things like that, that is perfect. It's nice and clean. I take my shrink tube, I slide it up. And if you're wondering, this is 1/4 to 1/8 heat shrink. You just slide that up over your whipping knot. Sometimes it needs a little bit of coaxing. You can kind of twist it. There you go. I'll pull it back down to get that fold out of it. There we go. Once I get it situated where I want, just enough to cover those wraps, what I'll do so I don't burn my fingers, I'll put them in a pair of needle nose and then just apply even heat front to back. Squish that down. And there you go. That's a finished looped end. All right, I'll show you the finished product in just a minute. All right, so here's the finished product. Lots of uses for these. You can do all kinds of great things. This right here is a rod leash for a kayak. You can attach this to your rod holder on this side, and then this is a $1.50 product from Home Depot called a cable cuff. You just open it up like a pair of handcuffs. You can put that around your fishing rod and then close it up tight. You can use it for pocket knives on your backpack, flashlights, all kinds of great things. So yeah, there you go. All right, so the last thing that I like to do after I take the coil off of the wood dowel and I make my whipping knots and my looped ends, I like to reverse the coils. You can see this is nice. It's a nice tight coil, but you see on this example here, that is a lanyard with the coils reversed. And it really makes a nice tight lanyard. So all you have to do is I put one of the looped ends in my drill and I just pull it tight, and you'll see what happens as I turn. Oh, hold on. Dang it. Sorry about that. Got to go the other way. Can you see it? The coils are reversing. Now they're about to meet. And there you go. Real simple. I take it out of the chuck, and now you've got a super tight coiled lanyard that you can stretch, and that memory will stay and stay and stay, and it goes back nice and tight every single time. I'm really pulling on that hard, and it goes back every single time. So I hope you like it. Make some up today, and take care. We'll see you again.